Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Wayne Baker and I'm one of the staff therapists with Affair Recovery. And this week, we're going to continue our series on why couples fail after an affair. And this week, we're going to address the topic of the lack of empathy. One of the primary reasons couples fail when dealing with an infidelity or sexual addiction is when the unfaithful spouse can't or doesn't express empathy. Empathy is such an imperative component of the healing the wounds of betrayal. For the betrayed spouse, it's almost like being punched in the gut or experiencing a panic attack when they hear the news. And if the unfaithful spouse can't express empathy, then healing will take so much longer than it ordinarily should. For a lot of people, as we begin to talk about the importance of empathy, both parties will start to think about, that's a crazy idea to put yourself back in that situation. I just want to move past it. Well, I guess I certainly understand why that thought might be there. But what we've learned over time is that empathy is king. It is the unfaithful spouse showing remorse and willing to do whatever it takes one day at a time to be safe again. It's a way that they can reconnect. One of the most important steps needs to occur is that the betrayed spouse needs to know that the unfaithful spouse understands their pain. And not just once. It's more than just saying, I'm so sorry, I understand. In a way, you've got to experience their pain by putting yourself in their shoes and grieve over what your actions have cost your betrayed spouse. And truthfully, anything short of that leaves the betrayed spouse wondering whether or not you really do care or actually even want to. This is a vital component to the healing and the recovery of a marriage or a long-term committed relationship. So if you really want to get it and want to get healthy and want to move forward, empathy is one of these foundations that slowly but surely move forward in hopes of eventual reconciliation and restoration. Truthfully, there is no guarantee that it's going to work every single time. But what we know and our research shows that 87% of the couples that go through our program, which empathy is such a big component of, go on to report that they have a better marriage than they ever had before. It's just one of the key markers that, as a therapist, that I hope to see when I'm working with a couple, that I know that if empathy is there, if there's an effort to express empathy, then the positive and the forward momentum is really going to help in the recovery process. And along those lines, that until the betrayed spouse believes that the unfaithful spouse gets it, they experience this internal pressure to keep talking about it until their mate understands, or until they understand that their mate understands. Maybe a better way to say it. As couples in my office learn to express empathy, the unfaithful spouse may interpret this to be a tactic to shame them or torture them or even manipulate them. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I think it's really good for both parties as you learn to express empathy, and for the unfaithful spouse to begin that process for a while even. There's several assignments that we give that help people do this really well. The betrayed spouse actually has the opposite intent of the shaming and torture and manipulation. They will continue to ask questions in an attempt to heal their wounds and to actually reconnect. And that doesn't make sense really often to the unfaithful spouse. But if the unfaithful spouse will accept the responsibility for their behavior, for the dysfunction, for their self-centeredness, early on, and the earlier the better, their betrayed spouse will feel safer earlier and then can begin to grieve the process instead of trying to make sure that you get it. Alternatively, when the unfaithful spouse remains hardened or defensive and they justify their choices, or they protect their affair partner, the betrayed spouse remains stuck. And it's hard for them to even wrap their head around or imagine a healthy marriage. It doesn't feel safe to them if their mate doesn't care enough to empathize, at least try to empathize with them and how they feel about their pain. It doesn't feel safe. It also doesn't feel safe if the unfaithful spouse refuses to talk about it, to talk about their choices or to talk about the impact of those choices on the heart of their betrayed spouse. It's one of the most damaging things I can think of that I've seen and heard in my office over time is where somebody refuses to talk about it, or they talk about it one time and then from then on they get defensive, or they say, we've talked about that already, we've got to move on, you've got to get past this. And truthfully, the only way I know that couples truly get past it is by talking about it. I tell people all the time, you got to talk, and you got to talk, and you got to talk some more with lots and lots of care and empathy. And that doesn't mean that you talk for 2 to 4 hours or even all night long, which I know a lot of couples do, and probably many of you have already done that. That's not helpful. But what I am talking about is these conversations that last 15 to 30 minutes, probably every single day for several months, until everything has been talked through, every infraction to the minute detail. But it's these little conversations that happen frequently are the most helpful, especially when they're bathed with empathy and understanding. And in light of all that, the other thing that I see frequently is that the unfaithful spouse may try to take responsibility for their actions and for what they've done. They may tell the whole story and the whole truth, and that's really a great start. I think it's the number one or the first factor that has to happen, but it's their unwillingness then to process what has happened and their unwillingness to consider what their actions have cost their spouse leaves the betrayed spouse feeling unimportant, not enough, unloved, that kind of thing. It's in this type of situation where the unfaithful spouse communicates their discomfort is more important than the pain their mate experienced as a result of the betrayal. I just want to remind everyone, whether you have been unfaithful or whether you're betrayed or both, that there is healing and hope for reconciliation, but a willingness to try and understand the impact of the betrayal is essential. I can't say that strongly enough. If you happen to be the unfaithful spouse, I want to encourage you as strongly as I can to open your heart, your ears, become a really good listener, and to commit to this long haul of healing. Listen to your spouse and try to understand what choices you've made and what that has cost your mate. Your willingness to put yourself in their shoes will go a really long way and help you to reconnect. I would say one more thing, that if it is hard for you to empathize with people, just in general, because I see that frequently, what that may mean is that you don't have a clear understanding of what empathy is. It also may mean that empathy wasn't demonstrated or communicated, or you didn't experience empathy growing up. I see that more often than anything else. So I'd like to encourage you then to take a look at your childhood wounds. It may not be traumatic in your mind, but there are wounds where mom or dad didn't come through for you in a way when you needed. And I'm not throwing mom and dad under the bus, but take a look and remember those instances where you needed some empathy and some compassion, and maybe do some EMDR or some work around there. And that might help you inch a little bit further into understanding what things are like for your spouse, and not just your spouse, but maybe your coworkers or your siblings or your friends as well. And you're able to express some empathy towards other people as well. And maybe even have some empathy for yourself. That would be awesome if that could happen. Empathy does not make us weak. It's a matter of fact, I think it's It's the strong that are able to do that, to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes and walk that road with them. And lastly, I just want to encourage you that while the thought of working through what may be several years of hurt and pain and sorrow seems daunting or insufferable, I just want to tell you that it doesn't have to be. At Affair Recovery, we have an EMS online course. It continues to prove itself to be this safe alternative to the agony of what recovery looks like without a plan. And I can tell you from years of experience that I have seen couples that try to recover after an infidelity or a betrayal, and they try to do it for years on their own, and they just get nowhere. But the EMS online course has an alternative. So I hope you'll consider it. You're going to get expert help, you're going to get a community, and you're going to get a plan for what you and your spouse are facing right now. I can assure you that it's not as hopeless as it seems. So thanks so much for joining me this week. I'll be back again next week to talk about another component of the elements of what makes a marriage fail after an affair. Thanks so much.